This conference will now be recorded.
Work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion, but there's generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings. We've had an opportunity to look at the formal agenda. Has anybody have any questions, comments about the agenda?
We had an addition, right, late this afternoon?
Actually, yesterday the agenda was amended.
Yesterday.
Okay, yesterday.
Yep. We added a consent item.
Okay. Any questions about that? Any other comments? If not, we can go ahead and get started.
Chair, I just want to say, Teresa, Lindsay Davis will be the presenter. I'm sorry, you sent it to me. I apologize. But she'll be doing the slides tonight.
Okay, I'll send her an invite.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. We got two items on the work session agenda this evening. We've got the Clatsop Forestry and Wood Products Economic Development Committee presentation, and then we have redistricting presentation and map proposal review. So we'll start with our Clatsop Forestry and Wood Products Economic Development Committee. We have 20 minutes scheduled for this, and it's on page 4 of our agenda. And I'll turn it over to Kevin Leahy.
Thank you, Chair Aquila. Good evening, commissioners. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to kick off and talk about this great committee that I've been part of as the executive director of CEDAR now for over 10 years, the Clatsop Forestry Economic Development Committee. And we have been in existence for well over 30 years. Proud to say a few years ago, Commissioner Thompson was there. We won an award at OSU, Oregon State. We celebrated afterwards for the leaders tour that traditionally we've led, which we'll talk about a little bit later here on the presentation. But I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to do our annual update. And I would like to introduce our chair, Chad Washington. Chad is the stewardship coordinator, for Greenwood Resources. Let him talk a little bit about himself. And then Lindsay Davis is most of you, I think you all know Lindsay. Lindsay was at OSU Extension. She is now the community outreach specialist and stewardship coordinator for Hampton Lumber. So we're going to take turns presenting here, but I'll turn it over to our chair, Chad, to kick it off.
Great, thank you, Kevin. As Kevin mentioned, I'm Stewardship and Community Engagement Coordinator here at Lewis and Clark Timberlands. Been in this role for a couple of years now and am chair of this committee. We'll begin by having Kevin go over a couple of these first slides, followed by Lindsay Davis presenting the information from Hampton. I'll be covering for John Nygaard, and then following that with some Greenwood Resources data as well. So Kevin, if
Perfect.
you'd like to start us
off.
off.
Next slide here, Lindsay. So this is the cover page here, and as I stated, this is our annual update, and we'll go to the next page. I'll just start kind of talking a bit about the CFEDC, the missions and goals. The commissioners, you all have the packet here. Lindsay, can you advance the slide there? About the CFEDC. So I'm not going to read it because it's right here in front of all of us, but I do want to say that the mission of the Clatsop Forestry and Wood Products Economic Development Committee is to share educational information regarding wood and paper products, forest management, land use, and related issues with community leaders and the general public. Our primary goals: to educate community leaders, which we're doing this evening to the commissioners and to the audience, and the public about the status and importance of the forest sector in our regional economy, and to stimulate economic planning efforts and economic development projects in the forest sector for the benefit of local communities. Next.
Are they advancing, Kevin?
What's that?
Are the slides advancing?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are, Lindsay. It's great.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, they are. Thank you. I appreciate it. So again, the committee members, we already introduced the three of us that are here tonight, but also, of course, Tom. It's so great to have Tom Scoggins join us. Tom is been on the committee for many, many years, a core member of the CFADC, and thank you, Tom, for coming on this evening. We have Dan Stark from OSU Extension as the forester, and Commissioner Courtney Bangs is our representative as the commissioner. Thank you, Courtney, Commissioner Bangs, for your efforts on behalf of this committee. We have Dan Goody, who is a district forester for Oregon Department of Forestry, Neil Bond from Oregon Department of Forestry, Aaron Groth from the OSU Regional Fire Specialist, a new position funded by OSU. We're so happy and excited to have Aaron. Again, I know that he participates in many meetings that you are, and again, I'm looking at the small screen here. If you are here tonight, please say hello as I'm introducing you. John Nygaard from Warrenton Fiber Nygaard Logging, Craig Storter from Weyerhaeuser, Lois Purdue, the plant manager for Hampton Lumber in Warrenton, Tom also, if he wants to say something, and Bill Young, a small woodland owner. Any of the committee want to say hello? Okay, so if not, we'll just proceed here. We'll go next. I'm going to cover the economic data here like I traditionally have done at both the annual update to the commissioners and also at our annual tour. And just the economic impact to Clatsop County of the forestry and wood products sector, 1,300 forest sector jobs, 6% of the total employment, the average wage of $70,000, and you'll see, we'll advance the next slide here in a minute, well above our county's average. Almost 30% of our county's economic base tied to this sector. And then the breakdown of the forest ownership, large private ownership, 56%, which Chad will talk to as a major part of that in his updates. State and others, 26%, small private, 17%. I mentioned, again, just as a reminder, on the federal side, it's less than 1%. There's just a couple of acres here in Clatsop County that are federally owned. And then some other comments to make about, we're working on our 2022 Job and Career Fair. I'm working with the school superintendents and the principals now, as well as Clatsop Community College and the Oregon Employment Department. Debbie Newton, who many of you know, we're planning to have a full Job and Career Fair this spring coming up, working through all of our COVID protocols. But we know the workforce needs across the board, and excited to have that happen again. And also to mention the Clatsop Works internship program, which I oversee. We have very great participation from this sector in that. Hampton Lumber, for example, we're going into year 5 this summer with our Clatsop Works paid internship program. And Hampton started it actually the year before in partnership with the Warrenton School District and Astoria School District. And from that springboard, we have this great program. A side note, we do have our Clatsop Works paid internship coordinator. Ryan Stanley has resigned. His last day with us was a week ago. Wish him all the best. We are actually out there looking. We have applications open until next Monday, the 13th. And the Clatsop Community College website has all that information. We're looking for great candidates to work with our high schools, with the college, and with our employers. So I'm happy to answer questions as we go through here. Next slide, please, Lindsay. This is very telling. Again, it speaks to the importance of this sector on the earnings side. This is a by-county breakdown of showing the forest sector annual wage. We're to the far left, Clatsop is, showing the sector, the percentage difference between our average income here in Clatsop County. A lot of it, of course, is based on our very important hospitality industry. But if you look at the differential of 85% differential between the county average wage and the timber and wood product sector, it's significant. So living wage jobs, many, and again, Lindsay will cover, and so will Chad, a lot of this with the full benefits also that are provided by the employers. So I believe next page is also.
Kevin, just 1 second. Kevin, just 1 second. If folks aren't presenting, if I could have you mute, I was hearing some static and some feedback there a little bit. So if you're not presenting, go ahead and mute yourself. Okay, Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, next slide. This is the part that is so important. And again, our job on this committee is to just share the economic importance of this sector. This is what was provided by Dan Goody to us, and again to the commissioners. We have this every year, public record. This is the harvest that Oregon Department of Forestry, the harvest from November 20 to 21, and it's a breakdown for the county. If you look at the bottom line here, the dollar amount is $22,944,466.49. Those are dollars that come back to Clatsop County. And this chart is kind of a small print, but again, I know everybody, you have this and it's available for those that are looking at it for the first time here. I want to just draw attention to some of the numbers here. And this is an annual. So this is what comes back into the county, school districts, roads, etc. So for example, the 25% school fund, $5 million. 4-H extension, $85,000. Lindsay would probably kill me if I didn't mention that. Clatsop County, $2.7 million. You can read down here, but some other highlights. Rural law, $1,146,000. Road district, that's county road district, $1,621,000. My employer, our community college, Clatsop Community College, $1,480,000. And the school district breakdown, you'll see a little school district, school number 8, that gets $5 million. That's the Jewel School District. From these harvests based on where they're located, etc. Sunset Transportation. So again, I think this is sometimes some data that is not really focused on, and it's the importance of this is on an annual, how it supports our community. So with that, I will turn it over to, unless there's questions. Yes. Did I say?
What the-
Commissioner,
Commissioner Bangs has.
oh, sorry.
just a real quick recap. I know that we had a Board of Forestry member request this specific information, and I was just wondering if you could, I love how it's just broken down very simply. I was wondering if you could send me this slide specifically, and then I can forward that on to the Board of Forestry.
Absolutely. Commissioners will do that. Lindsay Davis did this. Lindsay Davis took the data and she typed this up in a readable format, but we'll definitely provide that.
I see Commissioner Thompson has a question.
Sorry, I was trying to read and talk at the same time, Commissioner Banks. Kevin, help me understand that 10% county costs, that almost 2.3 million. What's that about?
You know, Commissioner Thompson, I would let the county respond to that, but I believe that's administrative fees. I'm looking at staff when I answer that question.
I can speak to that. Yes, that's the county's portion for the administrative fees per statute that for distributing the timber dollars.
So another way, thank you, Assistant County Manager. Another way of looking at that would be that Clatsop County gets 2.3 million, and then we get another 2.7 million. So that's 5 million because our administrative staff is enriched by that amount. And I think
Correct.
that, thank you. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see this page in our budget document so that when we're explaining to our lay budget committee and anyone who wants to read the Clatsop County budget, that this information is presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Appreciate that. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lindsay Davis.
Thank you. Now, before I advance to the next slide, and I'm sure Monica has noticed this too, the dates of November 2020 to November 2021 overlap 2 fiscal years. So it's a full calendar year snapshot, but these numbers as they would come in on your budget documents would look different as they relate to a fiscal year. So just noting that before I move on.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Now taking my budget hat off and moving on to my Hampton hat. So yeah, most of you know me from my days at OSU Extension, but I am, you know, happily planted out in Napa with the Hampton Family Forest family out there. And, you know, it's good to note that we have the Hampton Family Forest located out in Napa, about 30,000 acres that we manage out there. And then we also have the Hampton Mill in Warrenton that everybody has come to know and love as well. Just a side note before I head on to the mill information is economic impact. We're doing some really great things out on the Hampton Family Forest property out in Napa. We've done some great work with the North Coast Watershed Association on stream enhancement projects, and we just committed another $54,000 in kind to continue that work out there. We also have been really successful with our pollinator project that Jed Arnold had started before I came on board. And I was out there checking sites when I first came on board with Hampton. And we do have established honeybee hives that are now in some of the downed logs that are on the property. So huge success. So where we are now, as it relates to the mill, our starting wage is over $20 an hour, which is amazing. We contract with 48 logging and trucking businesses in Northwest Oregon, and combined they employ nearly 800 people. And then also with us being an essential industry, through those difficult times with COVID, we were up and running and at work each and every day. In our sawmill, we have 145 direct employees. I'm not going to go through and read each one of these numbers, but those that jump out, the $13.3 million in direct wages and benefits, $66.5 million in log purchase payments to private landowners. We have 13 active apprenticeships going on at Hampton right now. We work hard to promote from within, and as these are apprenticeships that are separate from our internships that we do with Clatsop Works. So we're really just trying to look at filling that pipeline of the next generation of workers, not only at the sawmill, but also on the tree farm as well. And then I will transition this over now to Chad. He's going to fill in for John Nygaard on the Warrenton fiber information.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. So Warrenton Fiber, they pay over $4 million in payroll each year for family wage jobs with full benefits, which, as Kevin noted in his earlier slide, is well above Clatsop County's per capita average income. Warrenton Fiber also pays more than $7 million each year to other local businesses and subcontractors. This is the indirect and induced economic effect of their activities here in the county. Annually, Warrenton Fiber helps harvest over 25 million board feet of trees. That's on local, sustainable, private, and public forests, transports them to local sawmills that make boards and building materials for the homes that we all live in. Lindsay, if you could advance the slide, please. Each year, Warrenton Fiber's log chipper purchases and processes over 5,500 loads of mostly tree tops and residues into wood chips that are then barged up the Columbia River and made into a variety of paper and cardboard products at our local paper mills. Using this wood allows landowners to utilize the whole tree, which is beneficial for a few reasons. One, there's less waste when we cut down a tree. We like to ensure that we're using all of it. It also reduces forest fire fuel loading and supports many other family wage jobs by creating a whole industry around the residues and treetops and secondary processing of those. Also creates paper products, which most of us use on a daily basis. Some of those paper products were kind of hard to find in 2020, but thank goodness that's no longer the case. Warrenton Fiber and Hampton alone combined make over $40 million in payments to employees. That's direct payment to family wage jobs. And I've also got a little bit of data similar to the ODF data on Greenwood's contribution. So if you were to look at our payments just to Clatsop County government, as well as the non-limited diking, fire patrol, that total is around $530,000 in direct payments. And then just looking at the schools, this is Astoria, Jewel, Napa, Seaside, Warrenton, and others, it's over $619,000 for a total of $1.2 million paid directly to the county just in the last fiscal year. And with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions for Lindsay, Kevin, or I.
Any questions? Questions, comments from the commission? Commissioner Thompson?
Well, thank you, sir. So I went on a tour of a local pulp and paper mill, and they let me know that because they used the products, that the treetops and all of that residue stuff that Chad was referring to, they were, I'm trying to remember the green term. Commissioner Webb, maybe you can help me. The whole life cycle of that product. Some paper mills import unregulated pulp from South America and other places. So that means they can, those who import unregulated pulp can sometimes undercut the prices of local mills that are using the whole life cycle because they're paying more to be ecologically sustainable. I thought that was interesting, and I hadn't known that before. I just wanted to raise that point. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Thompson. That's a really important point, that the wood products that come off of the timberlands here in Clatsop County, whether it be from Hampton or Greenwood or any of the other sustainable forest initiative certified lands, have a very rigorous regulatory environment that we operate under. And when you import from other countries that might not have as strict of standards or any standards at all, you are importing the goods, but you're also exporting environmental degradation. And we live in a global society, and we need to start looking at our impacts from our choices at that global community. Thank you for bringing that up.
Any other, oh, Commissioner Toyoka?
One other question, comment on that is, it's wonderful the different forest practices in use these days. All the different methods of forestry that help, with the basically the wildlife and the environment is great. One statistic I was told with one of the plants is that the newer, after like say, especially they were talking about a clear cut operation, the new plantings and the newer forests sequester so much more carbon than the older growth timbers. And that was pretty interesting to find out. So, I'm pretty amazed at the science behind all the different management practices you utilize, and it's not a cookie cutter. It's each land is treated differently, and so I think that's also should be highlighted along with the forest practice. I mean, the logging and the economic impacts, but the environmental impacts you guys have had has been very positive. Thank you.
It's a great point, Commissioner, and thank you for bringing that up. And it's true that when you're looking at a landscape scale instead of individual trees, that younger trees are more efficient at sequestering carbon. And when wood products are created from those trees, it takes them out of the risk of insects, pests, pathogens, and fire, and puts them into long-lasting wood products where they're much less likely to burn up or to decay from death from any of those other mechanisms. So thank you for bringing that up.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Thompson?
Just one more thing. So when Chad says fire or decay, that's when the carbon is released back into the atmosphere. As long as the trees are cut, harvested, and the wood products are used, then the carbon stays sequestered. If it burns, if it rots, the carbon is released again. So that's why it becomes important to deal with all of those issues too. Just wanted to be, I'm pretty sure you know that, but I have to say it out loud to remember it. Thank you.
That's exactly right. And a fun fact is about half the weight of any wood products is carbon, directly taken out of our atmosphere. And I know Commissioner Thompson has this near and dear to her heart, but there's some really cool advancements in wood products and mass timber, mass plywood panels. And we as an industry are really excited to see new markets develop and how we can provide the wood products for those new advanced wood products.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. Commissioner Thompson, you'll have to share that sometime. I haven't heard you mention cross-laminated timber or mass timber. Well, as someone who's grown up here and recognizes or thinks he recognizes how interwoven the timber industry is in Clatsop County and how much it means to us, it's helpful for me to have this presentation and to get an economic, impact or a number of what it really means to our community. So I really appreciate this presentation. Thanks so much, Lindsay, Chad, and Kevin for providing it to us. And if we don't have any other questions or comments, I think we'll move on to our next item. Thank you very much.
Chair Quila, I'll mention one last thing that's less forestry
Yes.
related, but dovetails with recreation and the tourism industry and how our industries are not necessarily in competition, but they complement each other. At Greenwood Resources, we have over 6,000 recreational permittees visiting our timberlands annually. And those people come into our community, and they also come with induced and indirect economic benefits in the form of staying at hotels, eating at local restaurants. And so there doesn't need to be a conflict between industries, but they complement each other.
Yeah, very good point, Chad. I agree with you. Commissioner Bangs?
And just to dovetail that statement, sustainable harvest also helps pay for the recreational opportunities of our visitors. Without the sustainable harvests, we wouldn't probably be able to afford such a beautiful recreational area. And then on a final note, Ms. Davis, if you would please take this and kind of do like a brief summary. I would love, this is what a wonderful presentation to share with the Oregon Board of Forestry. So again, I'll reiterate that I would love to be able to share this out, especially since it was directly requested of the counties. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Chad, Lindsay, Kevin. Have a good rest of your evening. We'll go ahead and move on to our next item, which is the redistricting presentation and map proposal review. We have 30 minutes dedicated for this, and it's on page 19. I'll turn it over to Tracy Kavenko, our county clerk.
Good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good.
We can.
Good, thank you. So we're coming in to you based on our county home rule charter. It directs that the following the release of the decennial census of the United States, the elections officer of the county shall initiate review of the population densities of each district and within 120 days of the release of the census shall present to the board a map detailing any necessary modifications of boundaries. Tonight I brought to you with working in conjunction with PSU Population Research Center and Oregon's Kitchen Table, CPS. We're bringing to you two proposals today that are in your packet. A proposal of Plan 1.3 and a proposal of 1.4. So based on the feedback that we received, that's also attached in your packet, the PSU Center for Public Service feedback summary. They provided a summary that they gathered from the written questionnaire along with the phone public hearings. We kind of had a public engagement. And this is what they have come up with. And based on what I can gather from the feedback, proposal of 1.4 seems to be the, I don't want to say the norm, it's the one that seems to be more desired based on what I'm hearing from the public. Of course, I am hearing also, why do anything? We shouldn't do anything, but we have to do something. So I bring these to you today just because I need to know which direction you guys feel like going. And then we need to process and move forward with, I believe, public hearings in order to adopt as an ordinance. And at that time, the public will have opportunity to comment directly on the map proposal. I would also at this time like to take the opportunity to change the precinct numbers into a 3-digit number to help ease in being able to tell the difference in our paperwork when we do the ballot styles versus a precinct. These precinct numbers came about by the precincts used to be names. They took the alphabetical list and they numbered them. So they've been this way since way back, as back as I could find in our records. So yes, I would like to be able to start with like precinct 101 and move forward. I don't plan on moving a lot of the lines, just to more accommodate the movement of the commissioner lines and clean up some precinct boundaries that have been there forever and don't make any sense anymore. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Bangs?
I just wanted to take a moment and mention that, yes, after reading through all of the information sent to us from Oregon's Kitchen Table, I agree with your observation that 1.4 seems to be the plan that most fits what our community is requesting from us, which is communities of commonality, not breaking up neighbors, and just kind of keeping important things like school districts and basic, you know, I love Napa and our Napa folks. We have very rural concerns that are often different than those who live within city limits. And so just honoring their thoughts regarding, we just have different needs. It's nothing wrong with that. It's just we're different and we have different concerns. And so I would have to say that, yes, I agree 1.4 kind of fits the requests that I've read from constituents. So thank you.
Commissioner Webb, I know you had your hand up there. Commissioner Webb?
Yeah, first I have a question. Tracy, do the precincts have to be equal in population size?
Precincts do not. They don't go by population. They go by registered voters. We can have up to 10,000 registered voters in a single precinct.
Wow.
That is not my goal. My goal is I may end up combining some precincts depending on how, if everything is the same in it, if district wise, then it doesn't make sense to have 2 precincts if it's all the same. So it's really, it's just a cleaning up.
Okay. My comment about this is that I think that of all 5 districts, my present District 3 that I represent is probably the most impacted by these changes. And I will have to admit that I think there's something good about representing both urban and rural areas. Because I know that for me, it has been, I live in Astoria, so I'm very familiar with Astoria. But it's been really good for me to have to also represent constituents in more rural areas. It gave me a really good feel for issues out there, especially as we've gone through the comp plan. So I'm a little sad to lose those people, but I do understand the commonality interest that was expressed in the surveys that were done. And I hope that as we proceed as a commission, that we won't think of ourselves as divided between commissioners from cities and commissioners from rural areas. I hope that we can keep that kind of common sense of what is good for everybody, because I think it's, just like as we see in Salem, where we have, every time at AOC, we have the rural commissioners against the urban commissioners, and it's not good government as far as I'm concerned. So I think that, and in my experience in talking to commissioners from other counties in both rural and urban areas, we have a lot more commonality than we do differences. And so I hope we can remember that moving forward, that our citizens often really do want a lot of the same things. So as I say, I'll be a little sorry to lose some of those rural interests, because I think it was healthy for me as a commissioner to learn about those areas of the county. But obviously, I think that the survey spoke very clearly about what our citizens want. So I'm in support of the 1.4. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too support 1.4, and I won't belabor that. I want to praise this process. Monday night, I was in Seaside talking about housing with the Seaside Committee on that this morning. I was in the Southwest Citizen Advisory Committee. The kind of process you've used here, I think, is a model that we need to follow going forward, because the most significant thing that we can do is be more capable at listening to everybody. We're blessed with very capable, very intelligent, very experienced community activists, and they're a voice. Our job, I told the CAC, is to listen to all voices, to balance and harmonize them. I think you've modeled that, County Clerk, so congratulations, well done. Thank you.
I want to give a lot of that thanks to Monica and Dawn for getting it all set up and get it going with the PSU group, because they've been great.
Okay, nice handoff. Well done, Assistant County Manager. It's when we have a process like this where we find experts who can help us be more capable, that's what we want to do. We want to gather the information that is, I told them, we commissioners, we have to be legal, ethical, fiscally prudent, developing good public policy that balances and harmonizes everybody's concerns the best that we're able. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Toyoka, are you, what's your feelings on 1.4?
Reading through everything, I believe, it is a consensus of those polled that 1.4 would be preferred. And I was happy with either 1.3 or 1.4, because you look at the criteria, it's not politically driven. It's looking at communities of interest. You're looking at transportation corridors. If it's either one fits all the corridors, and if in the constituents have a leaning towards 1.4, that's the whole purpose. We are doing what the community wants. So I would agree with 1.4 as well, because that appears to be what the people have said that they confer with most. But like I said, the best part of it is it's not politically driven. I wish Salem could take a cue from some of the small counties, and they say it's all about people, it's not about politics, and keep communities of interest together so they can be represented as whole communities and commonalities of interest. So yes, I would concur with 1.4.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. I would as well. I agree with the preponderance of the comments, or I guess the results from the survey, that 1.4 is the preferable option, and I agree with the rest of the commission. So I think that's the direction we can give you, Tracy.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's the direction we will head. And I will work with the county manager's office and our GIS and come up with the information we need for the public hearings as soon as we can. It's gonna have to be on a speed track.
Yes, and I'll echo the kudos that Commissioner Thompson and others were giving you, because we really appreciate all your efforts on this work. Commissioner Webb has a question or a comment.
I have a question, and I hope that maybe our county council will stop me if it's not appropriate. But can I ask Tracy what the results were on the recount today on the Cannon Beach proposal.
And I'm fine answering that, except I put it away. We found one more yes vote. So it's now 6 apart. 380 to 374 is no. So it is passed.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I have one more thing. Does anybody have an objection to the changing of the precinct numbers? That was another thing I want to make sure is fine with everybody before I move that direction.
Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Banks.
Oh, have you heard any objection, or you're just
No.
an abundance of caution?
It is a caution because they have never been changed. They were alphabetical and then they were numbered. And this would just make things a little easier and a little cleaner for us.
Well, it seems sensible, and it seems as though it's geared toward producing more accurate ballot issuance, and who doesn't want that? So,
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're seeing nods from everyone, so I think we're all in agreement with that. Commissioner Banks?
Well, I just wanted to circle back and say how much I appreciated going to Oregon's Kitchen Table for this survey. I feel like it's honoring everybody's perspective so much, but also it takes into account our rural communities and how much that they're now being considered at the state level more of a minority voice and an underserved voice often. And so I just really appreciated having some documentation that supported my instincts, I guess. So, and from such a nonpartisan perspective. So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. Anything further, County Clerk?
Nothing from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, we've got about 15 minutes if we want to take a break. And we can convene at 6 o'clock for our regular meeting. We'll see you then.
Mr. Poole, if I could ask you to stay muted until it's your turn to speak, that way we don't get feedback.
Is that any better?
Well, I just am asking you to stay muted until it's your turn to speak, and then we don't have the feedback.
Okay, yeah, I thought I was muted. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you.
All right, welcome everybody. It looks like we've got most everybody back. It's 6 o'clock. Let's wait just a minute here to see if Commissioner Webb joins us. And then we'll get started. There she is. Teresa, are we still recording?
Yes, we're good.
Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. The Board of Commissioners, as the governing body of Clatsop County, all county service districts for which this body so acts, is now meeting in regular session. Can we have the roll call?
Chair Quila,
Here.
Vice Chair Thompson,
Here.
Commissioner Toyoka,
Here.
Commissioner Webb,
Here.
Commissioner Banks.
Here.
We've all had an opportunity to review the agenda in our work session. We didn't have any comments or questions. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Thompson would move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. First item is business from the public. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a 2-minute presentation about any item on the agenda, except for public hearings. And remember, we have 2 public hearings on the agenda, so you'll have an opportunity to comment during those, or any topic of county concern that is not on the agenda. Clerk of the board, are there any members of the public who have registered to speak?
Yes.
Okay. If you have registered to speak, please wait until your name is called, then give your name and address for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Teresa, who's up?
Pud Pool.
Okay, Mr. Poole. And now you're muted. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay. I'm wondering how come we can't have a public meeting, as in public where everybody.
Can you name and address for the record to start?
Oh, I'm sorry. Pud Pool, my address is 89429 Lewis and Clark Road, Astoria. Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, I'd like to know why we can't have a public meeting where people actually can speak to our commissioners in there. The COVID thing is pretty much over. Everybody's had their shots. You can be as safe as you feel necessary. I don't understand why we can't have a public meeting. As for part of the agenda, you are planning on giving a whole batch of new changes to the Roadmaster's authority, which I disagree with completely. Unless you're into legalese, it's awful hard to read and figure out exactly what is happening, what they want. The Roadmaster in the past current one has lied to myself and another person concerning this, trying to make a county road out of the Lewis and Clark main line. And it's just, I've known every Roadmaster for the last 47 years that I've lived in this area. And the like.
So is this, Mr. Poole, can I just ask, are your comments about the public hearing that we have this evening? Because we have a public hearing concerning the changes to the road standards. Is that what you're commenting about?
That's part of it, yes. At this point, so far, yes.
Well, can you reserve those comments till when we have the public hearing? Can you reserve that till when we have the public hearing? Because we're going to have a public hearing. We're going to have a public hearing talking about exactly what you're describing with the changes to the road standards. And that's something we're going to have a public hearing on later. If you want to make those comments during the public hearing.
Your public hearing, you're breaking up on me there. Your public hearing in there apparently is on Zoom, which is why I'd like to know why we have to have it on Zoom instead of in person.
Okay. Do you have any other comments?
Okay, you're breaking up. You're not coming in all the way. Yes. like I say, as far as I'm concerned, it's too much authority to the roadmaster in there, who's the convening authority, and I disagree completely without going over it item by item. Some of those items I have some heartburn with. I don't agree with in there, the changes and who enforces them and who can contest them. That's my
Okay.
major concern with your current deal, and the fact that the commission claims to be transparent, and so far I haven't seen the transparency with this commission in there, especially when it comes to our road out here, Lewis and Clark, and the main line. We've had a lawyer trying to get information from the county. The judge threw the first part out and was supposed to get information from the county. My understanding is the county has withheld the information, therefore the suit was dismissed by Judge Matea. And that's basically the same thing that happened some years ago with a previous commission. They wouldn't release the information until after the fact, and then it was too late to do anything about it. Oh, well, tough luck type of thing. I'm trying to stay ahead of the game with the commission as far as transparency. I disagree with the transparency that's gone on so far. Like the roadmaster in particular, he's gone ahead and specifically lied to myself and another neighbor in my own driveway in there, and I've called him on it type of thing, and there's been no recourse. It's happened with the previous commission or previous roadmaster and county commission. So I'd like to have a reason
Mr.
why we
Poole?
can't have a public meeting in person.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Poole, thank you for your comments.
Yep. Thanks for your comment.
Yeah.
And I can't speak for anything that happened prior to with a prior roadmaster or prior commission, and certainly with regards to public meetings, we've had to do this just for protocols for COVID. We do anticipate going back to regular in-person meetings, and I'm anxious to do so, but that really is a public health matter, and that's why we're meeting in this way. We are going to have a public hearing regarding the ordinance number 21-05. So perhaps some of those questions will be addressed in that public hearing. And Teresa, do we have any other comments, questions, public comment?
That's all the public comment.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to the next item, which is the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Has everybody had an opportunity to review, and are there any questions or comments on any items on the consent calendar?
Mr. Chair, move to adopt the consent calendar.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the consent calendar as presented. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Before we go into the Commissioner Liaison Reports, we have our Public Health Director, Margot Lalich, with us, and I'm going to let her give an update on public health and all that's been going on. There's been a lot of activity, so I'll let her kind of share what all that is. So Margot.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Yes, it's been a little while since I provided you with an update, and with the recent changes and a newest variant that is visiting us, although not in Oregon as of my meeting this afternoon. I just thought I would give you a little bit of an update. And I just wanted to start with just a couple data points because it's important, and I think it gives us encouragement that after the new year, we will be able to return to more familiar ways of connecting. Don't have a date on that, but I think we're getting there. For Clatsop County, we have 79.4% of our population 18 and older who have received at least one vaccination. We're number 7 still in the state. Our goal is 80%. 73.2% have completed their entire series. That includes Johnson & Johnson or Moderna or Pfizer. And then 24% have received that booster dose. As you know, we're in a pediatric vaccination campaign right now, and that is for children 5 and 11. That's who we're really we're getting all kids, but we're focusing on the 5 to 11-year-olds. And as of today, 18.7% have received 1 dose, and about 8.7% have already completed their series, thanks to Columbia Memorial Hospital, who has had 2 large pediatric vaccination clinics. I was just checking in on the long-term care facilities, and as of the current data, 94% of residents have been vaccinated and 89% of the staff. So these numbers can change day to day, but it's encouraging. And, you know, our positivity rate this week is about 6.8%, and cumulative is 13.5%. And of course, we can expect that number to fluctuate based upon, for example, holidays and opportunities for individuals to gather and travel where there may or may not be certain interventions and mitigation measures in place. We are still maintaining 5 operations to respond to the pandemic. And I want to start with a PIC because communication is, I think, in many ways, the most critical and essential. Our PIC continues to operate 5 days a week. We have 2 supervisors and an extraordinary pool of volunteers who started out answering questions about where to get vaccinated nearly a year ago, and now are answering questions in response to 5 different simultaneous operations happening in the county, as well as multiple vaccination clinics for different ages and vaccines on a daily basis. So really want to recognize their extraordinary effort, and actually our emergency manager, Tiffany Brown, who continues to support the PIC and make sure that everything is running at all times. We continue to test 5 days a week at Camp Rylea as well. And as you would expect, the demand for tests are going up right now, not surprising with the new travel requirements, or updated travel requirements, I should say. There's a lot of conversation that's happening around implementing at-home tests, and there's a lot to figure out. I actually, in many ways, do support at-home testing, but it's not as simple as we just go from going to testing sites or clinics and getting tested to doing at-home tests based upon specificity and reliability and sensitivity of those tests, and also how to track that information. But they are playing an important role in schools. Our schools continue to do an exceptional job of keeping cases down, and also implementing the different criteria and managing it for testing, whether it's certain conditions for quarantine, or now being able to implement the test to stay in school, which only applies where there's universal masking, but it allows children who are exposed and not vaccinated to stay in school and be tested to monitor whether or not they become positive. So again, another strategy to support a least restrictive environment. Our Monoclonal Clinic continues to operate in partnership with Columbia Memorial Hospital and Providence Seaside Hospital. That's 2 days a week, and we started out with 1 patient. In our last couple clinics, I think we've had 2 or 3 patients who are receiving treatments, and that continues to go very well. And even though we're hearing about options for oral antivirals, at this time we continue obviously with the MAB clinic, and we will continue to maintain that clinic when those oral antivirals become available. Again, it will be on an allocation basis initially, as we've seen with vaccines and testing as well. Vaccine clinics, there are a lot of them right now, which is fantastic. Consuelo Hispano has been very successful in their clinics reaching out to the Latinx population. They had a very successful clinic last week in Seaside, and we continue to partner with Medical Teams International, and they are supporting us with our pediatric clinic outreach. We have a clinic this Friday in Jewel. We just had a clinic in Napa. We had a clinic this afternoon in partnership with Providence Seaside Hospital for the Seaside School District. And then we're at the fairgrounds this evening. And so we will continue those larger clinics through December, and then looking to integrate booster clinics into our drive-through clinic for Pfizer at Camp Rylea. So there'll be 2 options available, and that will be ongoing. And the Omicron variant, as I said, they have not identified a case in Oregon to date. The good news is we have a lot more information than we did a year ago, and even when Delta became the most prevalent variant. And so we have populations that are vaccinated, different age groups that are vaccinated. We certainly know mitigation efforts work. And so I expect we will learn a lot very quickly and be able to respond that much more quickly. Trying to think what else. I think that's sufficient for now. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Margot. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say a personal thank you to our health director, to our leadership, and to my pals who were happy to stick me with that booster. Because as you said, it's been a year. The public health staff already had jobs, full-time jobs. Now for a year, this extra layer of really life-threatening situations that you've been dealing with. Gratitude, thanks. But the thing that concerns me is that now I'm reading until we get enough people vaccinated all over the world, we are likely to see the pandemic become endemic, which means it's just going to be a fact of life everywhere that we all have to deal with. Am I reading the correct information? Can you help true me up here, please?
Yes, well, actually, Commissioner Thompson, the idea that the pandemic would become endemic is not, it's not new information. That's been part of the conversation with the epidemiologists and public health folks for the last certainly few months. And that's not unique. There are many diseases that started out as a pandemic and now they're endemic as well. What we really need to focus on and make sure is that we have all the appropriate mitigation and prevention strategies, harm reduction strategies in place such that we can continue to live with it, manage and care for those who are exposed and most vulnerable, and carry on with their lives without these additional layers of for some, I'm careful with this because, you know, as was mentioned earlier by one of the attendees this evening, is like that ability to make that human connection, right? And how do we balance connecting virtually and in all the ways that we're trying to connect through plexiglass and everything else, and really get back to just connecting in the ways that we do as human beings and recognize that, you know, sometimes we may need to wear a mask, and that's not new. We've been promoting masks during flu season for at least 15 years. Getting vaccinated is not a new strategy. Staying home when you're sick is not a new strategy, etc. And so just getting comfortable with that and continuing to implement it in the ways that we know work. But it's endemic.
Any other questions, comments for our public health director? Commissioner Toyoka.
Thank you. Well, kind of since we went down that path, I have a question, you know, just a clarification. And, you know, by no means, I'm not an anti-vax, I'm not an you know, I just have questions because there's so much information out there, you know, and I read about the CDC and World Health, you know, and they all say that basically vaccination won't stop you from getting sick. It won't stop the transmission of the variants. It just kind of creates that new protein spike and, you know, same protein spike. So what they're saying is it might reduce the severity, but it's not going to stop transmission. It's not going to stop you from getting sick. So they all circle to this, you know, notion of it's already endemic. since with therapeutics. So is that a factor in getting us, in that conversation of endemic, or are we at that point?
Where it is endemic?
Yeah, because if you look at all these other things they're saying, we're the vaccine is not a cure. It's, we can still catch it, you can still transmit it. So it's not going to stop the disease. And it's the new Omicron, like even the World Health, I just read it's less severe. So it's patterning like it would be endemic. It's, like a flu from, generations ago. It's already mutated to where it's low enough to we live with it. We have therapeutics. Is that the trending that you're hearing of for this new variant or this new COVID?
I think what you're saying is very realistic. And again, it's just, it feels like we've been in this, well, we have been in this really for 2 years, right? The vaccination campaign for a year. And it's hard to believe, though, that we're still learning. We're still learning how this virus mutates, and that there are these spontaneous mutations versus just mutating off of the previous version of a variant. And so we have plenty of vaccine. We're still on allocations for treatments, right? And I expect once we get, oral treatments, just like we have Tamiflu and other antivirals for the flu, and we can effectively treat patients in the hospital. Unfortunately, there will always be those who are more vulnerable than others. But I think once those bases get covered, it's just, we have to make a choice. And some of that will be community by community, and some of that will be, outside of the local community. I think in our community, we've been on this trajectory, and I think we're staying on it, and we can see evidence that this community-wide effort and this collaboration and all our mitigation strategies are working, and the evidence is there in the numbers.
Commissioner Thompson.
Well, thank you, because I've been comforting a friend whose mother just died of COVID because she thought she didn't need to get vaccinated because the whole thing was a hoax. So I wasn't intimating that I didn't believe in vaccination. I believe in vaxxing and masking and all of that because I'm in the cohort that's vulnerable, and I don't want to give it to anybody else who's vulnerable too. Because I look at the people who have died, old people, young people, a lot of folks. So I want to be super careful because I want to take care of people, and I want that same compassion and courtesy coming back to me as well. People have to do what they believe in, but I hope that we care about each other and would do that abundance of caution thing. So that's my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Tuioka.
Yeah, just to follow up with Commissioner Thompson, I don't think it's a matter of questioning what's going on. It's just that people have questions. And I think that's what we're really getting at, is there's so much out there, so much information that, I think probably like the rest of my fellow commissioners, we get hit on every day. What are we doing as a county? What's going on? What's going on? So just a lot of questions out there because you could read information from 6 sources, get 6 different answers. So it's very, very difficult. And that's why I guess I pose questions to you, Margot, and because, we all have questions. We're not questioning, but we have questions. So thank you very much.
Yes. And Commissioner Tuioka, I appreciate it. And again, as you all know, I have a very global perspective on things, and part of it just comes from my own professional experience in other places, but also knowing, I've been around long enough to see other emerging infectious diseases come forth, and the fear, the confusion, the stigma, the taboos, the misunderstanding, and some of them still continue, right? Because we all come from different perspectives, belief systems, doubts, And so I, again, as I've shared in many different ways, just try to hold space for that. And while we will all agree on many things, there will be just differences in beliefs and opinions, and we just have to work with that. We have to hear that, and we have to listen well and figure out how we will live with this going forward in the diversity of who we are as a community and the perspectives that we come from. And my hope, and it's kind of what I take to this approach of a least restrictive environment in the school setting, is how do we hold space for all the diversity in our community and yet live with this new and emergent, well, it's a new infectious disease that's likely not going to go away, and recognize also that people have individual choices, and we have to hold space for that as well.
Commissioner Bangs.
I just want to take a moment and say that I appreciate your global perspective, but also your compassion. Because as you move through this, and as you have moved through this for the last couple, I honestly don't know how much time we've been in this time warp. I appreciate your compassion above all, because you listen, you acknowledge, you filter, and you're also maintaining, a high level of decorum in the process. And you're very compassionate, and so I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad we have you on our leadership team.
I agree more. Just one question. It was brought up earlier about in-person meetings, and I know we have taken the I think very wise approach of remaining in a virtual format. It's certainly been I think advantageous for a lot of reasons. It helps us participate, and a lot of people can participate virtually, but I think we all are anxious to get back to in-person meetings. If we continue on the trend that we're on right now, do you think we could transition to an in-person format in 2022 or next month?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely a consideration. I think we will need to continue to have a hybrid environment, and that's not new. Many public meetings have been virtual as well for accessibility reasons. But I absolutely think that's a consideration. And I know for myself, thinking about and beginning those conversations around how do we navigate masking. Masking will be necessary and ongoing in certain environments without question. But there are other environments where it may or may not be as critical. So we'll look at that in the new year, and we'll welcome it.
We will. I hope that we don't have any more wrenches in the works, and you never know what kind of each day brings. But appreciate all you've been doing, Margot. Thanks again for the very comprehensive report, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks. We'll move on to the Commissioner Liaison Reports. Commissioner Webb, we'll start with you.
Okay, good evening. Last Saturday, the Oregon Geographic Names Committee approved our recommendation that an island out in the Columbia River that used to have a very long different name be renamed Lark Island, and they approved that move. So I think this is going to help simply simplify. I also understand that the Corps of Engineers is also going to be taking a look at some of the islands that are out in the Columbia that that perhaps need to be have signage put on them. Because we do know, and I think it's going to happen even more when we open up our Westport Park, is that we do have a lot of boaters who use the Columbia River, and aren't always clear about what islands are accessible to them and for different uses. You know, some islands can be camped on and some cannot. So I think this is something that maybe we kind of need to take a look at to watch for in the future. There is, I think I have mentioned before that the Housing Authority is in the process of two major construction efforts. One is that we're building a 42-unit affordable housing, we'll call it, apartment complex in Warrenton. And that's going through the final permitting process right now. And so you'll see pretty soon that we'll be breaking ground there. The other effort is that the Owens Adair building is we hope, is going to be undergoing some significant renovations. And the developer would like to take the present parking lot and actually build additional units on that parking lot. But there's a little bit of a reach because the city of Astoria, of course, is very sensitive to providing enough parking for any new development. I made the request of the Housing Authority to please hold a meeting, which we're going to have next week, at Owens Adair for all of the residents, because I've been receiving an awful lot of questions. What's going on? You know, they're digging holes in our parking lot. What does that mean? Et cetera. So we're holding a meeting for all the residents next week, which we hope will be able to clarify for them exactly what the Housing Authority's plans are in the near term. Earlier this week at a coastal zone management meeting, which includes the coastal counties in Oregon, all of them, there was a fair bit of discussion from AOC about what this short session is likely to look at. And apparently it isn't just the eviction issues, but they're apparently going to get some kind of a feel for a kind of a snapshot of what's likely to happen in the session this spring. A couple of things were mentioned. One of them is cannabis. Ron Bovet was not able to be more specific about that. But a couple of real important issues came up at this meeting. One of them is that from both the federal government and from the industry, we're receiving a lot of interest about installing wind turbines on the Oregon coast. And this, as I guess with most issues like this, is fraught with conflict. And I think we need to be watching this very, very carefully. There were apparently the industry itself is pushing very hard for these federal leases. And I, for one, am trying really hard to figure out exactly what federal and state agencies are involved in the approval of the leases. Apparently is a purely federal thing, but there have to be state agencies involved because all this electricity generated by these wind turbines has to be brought ashore, and those cables are going to land someplace. And right now in our zoning code, nor in any of our cities, apparently, except one, is there any history of cable landings. And so it's something that we're going to have to, I think, to address in the very near future. Apparently there are some discussions in Curry and Coos County about the issue that what they've heard is that some of these investors in the turbines are seeking to bring electricity ashore in their counties in Southern Oregon and then send that electricity to California. So I think we you know, we've exported enough of our electrical production in this state. I hope we can get a handle on this so that issues like that don't happen. But I think this is definitely an issue that, especially in the next legislative session, we're going to have to take a real careful look at. Yes, the other thing that we talked about at the CZM meeting was the issue that in the entire North Coast, excuse me, my roommate has discovered a noisy toy, so I'm sorry. Sweetheart, hey. Okay. We are all of our North Coast counties are dealing right now with short-term rental issues. And we did have a chance at AOC to talk among us about some of these issues, but there's a great interest on virtually all of the North Coast counties to do more. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to set up some, if not Zoom, then in-person meetings about discussing the commonality. One of the points that I think was brought up, that I thought was particularly interesting, is that even though STRs affect our own in-county housing issues, however, the North Coast counties, from a tourism standpoint, basically do compete with each other. And so the more coordinated our policies on STRs can be, the better it is really for the whole industry, because it doesn't pit any one of us against another county-wise. So some very important issues that it looks like we've got to put a laser beam on. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. And I know that the commercial crab industry will look very carefully at wind turbines, offshore wind turbines as well. Commissioner.
I'm sorry, you cut out, Commissioner Quila.
Oh, Commissioner Thompson.
Okay, so I'd like to pick up on the housing thing. AOC and LOC have been working for years to coordinate among the coastal counties. So that is in fact happening. This is one of the issues that I think we as a County Board of Commissioners need to look at in our strategic planning, is how we can coordinate and collaborate and really share effectively the information and the actions that we're working on in disparate ways, because I don't think we have an adequate mechanism for that. So the assistant county manager and the county manager and Andy and Margaret and I sat and talked. We're in those initial stages so that we can do something in Clatsop County. But it's the coordination. It's scattered. It isn't organized into a coherent system of information sharing and that coordinated muscle movement that our county manager likes to talk about. So Commissioner Webb, I don't know how you and I talk about that, but this is something that we need to do, and all of us as commissioners need to do. I will tell you that Monday evening, I sat in Seaside with Councilor Wright and his committee who's dealing with affordable housing. They recorded that meeting. It's on the internet. If you can't get enough of listening to me talk, there's another opportunity for you. But what I mentioned was the fact that we're looking to coordinate, because it's not just within Clatsop County. I'm sorry, within the County Board of Commissioners, it's all over Clatsop County with the cities and the county. It's also among all of the counties on the North Coast. It's the counties all up and down the coast, so that we have that coordinated muscle movement. And again, referring to Seaside, yesterday I went to the December 7th, the 80th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor Day of Remembrance. And Josh, our Veteran Services Officer, did another wonderful job of emceeing that. We got to hear history from a 91-year-old community member who was listening to the plains as they were attacking. No. She was dealing with the blackout stuff. We had a World War II veteran who had listened to the plains. So we had that contingent there. I was able to share with the people there through Josh's announcement that we were looking tonight about the contribution to the Vietnam Veterans War Memorial, that $5,000. I want to tell you the feeling in that room, the longing for us to be able to commemorate their service and raise up what those disproportionately coming from seaside soldiers during Vietnam did to contribute to our safety and well-being. They were very interested. They were talking about getting a bus or a van and going down to Salem when the Vietnam War Memorial is dedicated. I hope they live long enough to do it. I hope that we can act on that tonight. Another thing that I think is very important, the building opportunity. It was the Oregon business plan. Every year for the past 19 years, there's been a conference where business leaders and public sector leaders come together and have what they call an annual leadership summit. This was the 19th. The governor was there, Senator Merkley was there, Senator Wyden was there, Pat Gelsinger, the CEO of Intel, was there, talking about automation, talking about the fact that Intel is the last company in America right now who's building computer chips. And so how do we participate in this? We've got to have housing. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We've got to have adequate housing. We've got to have broadband. We've got to have childcare. I was fortunate enough to meet personally Carla Chambers, who's the co-owner and vice president of Stallbush Island Farms. She was one of the presenters in the Strengthening Oregon Manufacturing. She was the former employer of Commissioner Bangs back in the day. This is a very impressive person. She spent 20 years on the Federal Reserve Board. She's an Oregon treasure, and we're well connected with her. She also now sits on the Board of Forestry. She cares about what happens in rural Oregon. The last session of the day was called Looking Ahead, Opportunities for Oregon. There was one person on this panel, Eric Forrest, the co-president of Bigfoot Beverages. He also was active with Ford Family Foundation. He said something that was incredibly significant. He talked about the disproportionate impact on rural Oregon of COVID. He talked about our job losses. He talked about our economic losses. He talked about our health impacts. This is something that we have to get organized so that we're better able to describe what life is here for us. Because if we don't, that gap between rich and poor, that gap between urban and rural will only continue to grow. So yes, to look for win-win solutions, to look for ways that bring rural and urban together, but to be clear about the disproportionate impact and the need for geographical equity. There was a lot of talk from the I-5 corridor about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Absolutely, racism is something that is alive and pernicious and has to be addressed. The answer is not a different kind of privilege. It isn't readjusting the privilege, it's creating a better playing field. So I think that's really important. And I have pages of notes. Commissioner Webb asked me during the AOC conference to take notes for it, but I'm telling you,
Got it.
If you could, Janice, I see somebody has joined us. If you could mute yourself, please.
Thank you. I have notes and I'm not afraid to share them. So that's important. The last thing was today, the Citizen Advisory Committee from Southwest, my neighborhood, spent 3 hours wrapping up their work. The chair said that it was 30 meetings, and I believe, I haven't been at all 30, that's for sure, but I've attended one way or another most of them. Here's what I'll say. I have great respect for the people who've been involved with this process, who sat on the committee. As I listen to their concerns, as I listen to their requests, I say over and over again, what comes to my mind is the fact that my friends and neighbors need to look for an alternative legal structure. They need to consider a homeowners association, a special district, or even incorporation, because the level of services that they want to set really calls for that. The county taxpayers can't afford to pay for what they want to do for their community. I really respect what they want to do for their community, but somebody's going to have to pay the bill under a legal structure that allows that. That's my report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Bangs.
Good evening, everyone. I just had to make note that our work session presentation this evening regarding our forestry industry in Clatsop County just reminded me how important my attendance to the FTLAC meetings are and my attendance to the Board of Forestry meetings. Recently, we were discussing our forest management plan here in the state, which will have impact in Clatsop County. And I have logged in my thoughts and my comments. I appreciate Commissioner Thompson also attending those meetings. Often we are in sync with how protective we are regarding our economy here in Clatsop County. And how thoughtful we are in regarding to balancing it environmentally also. And so we're just moving forward. I am hopeful. I am interested to see what occurs with the NEPA process and the HCP. I did make note in our FMP conversation that I really had wished that they had these conversations with us in regards to the HCP also. I feel like a very large ball was dropped by not involving our county and the other trust land counties in the conversation. So that's just kind of a brief update on the meetings that I have been attending. But also I just wanted to make note, I have a feeling that the forestry industry and our environmental groups would be very interested also in that windmill, wind turbine situation, because we are working so hard to protect our marbled murrelet seabirds. I cannot imagine what could potentially occur to those populations along our coast. But anyhow, that's just a thought, along with our crab industry, etc. So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Commissioner Toyoka.
There we go. I'll make this quick. It's kind of funny, since our last meeting, all my constituent correspondence with everybody in the community has only been about our comp plan and item 10. We're looking at housing. We started talking about housing. That's the only thing that's coming up lately. This last week was conversations about housing. A lot of different perspectives, but I think that boils down to, and I can't wait to get back, start working with our planning commission as far as infrastructure. What do we, to increase the housing, make affordable housing, make, market-based housing. On the North Coast, we need the infrastructure to support that. You can't just plop more homes in. You have to be able to accommodate transportation and all the other, things that go with those homes. Some of the people in Gearhart talking about, the land itself is so expensive. It's about the land you could buy in some areas is the price of a median home in the county. So where are you going to find market-based, or where are you going to find affordable housing here? And I think that's some of the conversations we'll have to have with the Planning Commission. We get together is, we look at unincorporated areas. What are we doing about land use, zoning, densities? There's a lot of things that have to come into conversation. But I eagerly wait that time we get back together and start working on these things. And I'll leave it at that for now for liaison report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Commissioner Toyoka. I just was reading this article that's really old. It's actually from October, but it was a Deschutes County Commission allocated $6.6 million in American Rescue Act funds for childcare. I don't know if that other commissioners had seen that. Obviously, it begs the question, how much did they receive in American Rescue Act dollars? And significantly more than we did. But it is becoming more and more prevalent that, getting a model in place where you have public-private partnerships working with, daycares like Little Sprouts, Warrenton Prep, the Seaside daycare. That this is going to have to, incorporate a number of different parties and a sustainable funding model. And it's going to be a challenge, but certainly I've had more interest in the last few weeks in talking about childcare than we've had in a long time. So I know there's some motivated parties out there, and I appreciate Commissioner Bangs and the rest of the childcare task force work on this. I do, and Joanna, our county council as well. I am optimistic that we're going to get something put in place that can be countywide, not just for one single entity, but for others as well. And we'll just we'll keep sharing as things go on. But yeah, I think that it certainly generated a lot of discussion and interest because the need is just increasing. And so we have to take action, and certainly it's going to require some discussion in our budget time as well. Is can we put some money towards childcare in the future? So anyway, I don't have anything else to report. I think we'll go ahead and move on. If anybody has anything, Assistant County Manager, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple quick updates. Speaking of housing, I did send yesterday an updated revised letter of support for a housing project taking place or going through the RFEI process in downtown Astoria. And so if the board has a chance to review that letter and get back to me in regards to whether or not you are supportive of having the chair sign that and submit that to the city of Astoria in regards to the Heritage Square project, that would be great. And then you'll be receiving your packets, your December 15th work session packets here in the next day or so. And on page 11 of that, this is where we will be having the architect firm of Sierra come before the board to talk about our strategic facilities plan. And so they have a question that they just want you to be thinking about prior to the meeting. So that way, when we're in that work session, you already kind of have had an opportunity to think about the question and come into the meeting with some ideas prepared. So when you get your packet, if you just want to check that out and think about that question, that would be great for next week's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant County Manager. If there are no other items, we'll go ahead and move on to the public hearings this evening. We have two public hearings. First is a public hearing on ordinance number 21-05, revisions to subdivision and partition regulations and road construction standards. This would be the first reading. It's on page 84. We have materials presented here, and I'll turn it over to our Community Development Director, Gail Hendrickson.
Thank you, Board. Again, for the record, my name is Gail Hendrickson, Clatsop County Community Development Director. And Ordinance 2105 deals with the process and the procedures for subdividing and partitioning property, and also makes amendments to the road construction standards. So we have been working with public works staff since 2018 to go through the code that we have and to develop the recommendations that are in your agenda package this evening. The county has had subdivision regulations on the books since at least 1966, and even though these current standards don't date back that far, they did need some updating and refreshing. And so that you'll see in the attachments that are included as a link in the agenda package that the primary changes are related to updating out-of-date references in the text, updating code references and ORS citations, making sure that our practices and procedures that we're actually implementing and utilizing are codified and put into the code, making sure that our terminology is up to date, and you'll see a lot of revisions that refer to changes where we would call out the Public Works Director and the county engineer, or the county engineer to make be the deciding person in a decision, to just update that to include both of them, and also put in there that it could be their designee as well. So there are a lot of changes to that type of terminology. We wanted to make these changes in order to increase clarity for people going through the process, particularly when we talk about road maintenance agreements and how those are recorded, and also to make it transparent, because as I said, our practices have evolved, but our code hasn't kept track with that. We did mail out notices at the end of October, beginning of November, and they were postcards that were sent to all property owners within unincorporated county. And even though we were not required under state statute to do that, the reason we did is that there is some changes to Table 3.2, which we'll look at in a moment, but these change the county's road construction standards when you are subdividing or partitioning property, or if you're constructing a road that will eventually become a county road and that the county will take over maintenance on. Oops. So Table 3.2 contains the current and proposed changes. And so you'll see that it's broken into two sections. The first section deals with those roads that will become county roads. And in some cases, the road width would actually decrease, but in other cases, if you're building an arterial road, which would be a very major road designed to carry large amounts of traffic, those roadway widths would actually increase. Same thing when we talk about the public and private road standards, and these are what you would typically see in subdivisions or in partitions. And if you're partitioning and your road is only going to ultimately serve 1 to 3 parcels, the road standard stays the same. It's a 14-foot minimum width. But as you move up in the number of parcels that a road would serve, then the roadway would eventually go to a 20-foot road width. And that would actually decrease if you're serving 10 or more parcels. And the reason that Public Works has proposed these changes is to bring the standards up to current best practices and industry standards. And so it is not tied to any new road construction that the county is proposing, but it would affect people who are partitioning or subdividing their properties. So we have brought these proposed changes first to the Planning Commission for discussion and review back on April 13th of this year. We brought them back to the board after we made some revisions on November 3rd for a work session review. And then we brought them back to the Planning Commission on November 9th for a formal recommendation to the board. And the Planning Commission at that November 9th meeting did recommend that the board approve the changes as recommended by staff. Again, we did send out that Measure 56 notice to all property owners within unincorporated Clatsop County, even though we were not required to by state statute. We also placed notices of the Planning Commission meeting in the Daily Historian, the Tillamook Headlight Herald, the Cannon Beach Gazette, the Clatskanie Chief, and the Seaside Signal. So I have the proposed revisions pulled up if there are specific questions that anybody has about those. And I would also like to have our county engineer address the board as well. There is one additional revision that Public Works is recommending that came in after this board packet was prepared. We have spoken with County Council about it. She's deemed it a minor change, but I would like for him to discuss that as well. Thank you.
Okay, we'll turn over to County Engineer. Dean?
Hi. Yeah, so one engineer, or the one area that I was, we had some comments from the public about was in section 3.9860 roadway construction and serial partitions. And we'd kind of written that, and it was a little too restrictive, and that wasn't really the intent. The intent was to basically, get the road constructed for, all future lots that could be developed. But what it did was it kind of implied that it would just be a permanent development restriction on it, and then you couldn't partition anymore. So what I had, the revision that I would like to add is to, in that section, is to make number 4, change that to 5, and add a new number 4, which says, alternatively, an applicant may record a temporary development restriction on the larger parcels with the condition that the full right-of-way easement width shall be reserved on the initial partition. Any required future road improvements shall be completed prior to the sale of those parcels or the recording of any future partitions. And that would still accomplish the same goal as what we intended before, was so that, the roads do get constructed to the full width without people doing serial partitions and, having a 14-foot roadway to them.
Is it possible to blow that up a little bit there, Dean, or just to look at it a little? Yeah.
And so what it was that that number 3 basically said that they would record a permanent development restriction, which would have prevented development on those larger parcels. So that addition, what just read to you, would allow for a temporary development restriction, which would still allow development on those.
Okay. And that is is it possible to scroll down to the red additional, that right there? Okay.
Yeah, that was from before.
Okay, that's just your comment. Okay.
Yeah.
It's good, because this is kind of the questions I had, is about whether this is going to restrict the opportunity to develop these future parcels. I see Commissioner Bangs has a question. Commissioner Bangs.
So the Measure 56 notice sent out to our residents alluded to that these changes could potentially impact the value of their land, or the market value, resale value, so on and so forth. Could you take a moment and just discuss it in a layman's terms on what potential impacts that could have to a current landowner in our unincorporated area?
Yes, so state statute, and I apologize because I don't have the statute in front of me and I don't have the number memorized, but state statute requires very specific language when a Measure 56 notice is sent out. And it says, and I think it's designed to catch people's attention, but the language basically states that the proposed change may affect the value of your property. The reason we erred on the side of caution and sent the notice out, even though we didn't have to, is because of the changes that might require someone who's partitioning their property to build a wider road. And that is a greater expense than what they would have to do now. Building an additional 2 feet of road will cost more than what you would have to build now. So that's the reason that we did it. It does not change tax structure or tax rates or anything like that, but there could, I guess, conceivably be an impact that if I sell my land to you today and you only have to build an 18-foot road, and you buy it and tomorrow you have to build a 20-foot road, there could conceivably be some sort of financial impact on a property.
Thank you, Gail. Commissioner Bangs has a follow-up, and then I see Joanna has a comment.
Could the county be liable for any take in that situation? And then continuing comment, do we have any current permits on the dockets that this would impact? Or any people, I guess, that this would potentially impact that we need to communicate with?
I'll answer the second part of your question, Commissioner, but I'll defer to County Council for the first part. So the ordinance, if it's adopted, would go in effect 30 days after adoption. And so any of the applications that came into partition land after that time would be subject to the new requirements.
Okay, County Council.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I just wanted to add that the statute requiring the Measure 56 notice is ORS 215503. And to answer Commissioner Bang's question about whether this could create a taking situation, the answer is no. This is not going to create a taking situation. State law, I think wisely requires, in certain circumstances and not this one, when there's going to be additional restrictions on future development, that we provide that notice. And so that is the intent of why that notice was put out, but I do not see any takings.
Okay, Commissioner Bang.
Sorry to continue, but in regards to this change, or this potential, I guess, ordinance change, are there other, like, is this a state recommendation, or is this a local recommendation, or are we following suit along with other unincorporated county, like areas in other counties? I'm just curious, as we're moving forward, where the information is coming from. And then I just wanted to make note, I'm kind of bummed, maybe I missed it, but it's like this information being presented tonight is not in my board packet. I don't know if it's in other people's board packets or if I'm just looking at the wrong pages.
It's because there was so much information. It's located on the website, and it states that on the agenda that the additional materials were on the website. So I apologize if that wasn't clear.
Yeah, and I have it in the script there, a link to the website, and I did review it on the website information, additional information.
Yeah, I apologize. I speed read through our agenda items. I shouldn't, and I should probably pay a little bit more attention.
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot to it. Any other?
Yeah, just to say, it was 1,000 pages, so we decided not to mail those out.
1,000 pages is definitely the threshold. I would say less, but Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. Well, I don't know if this is actually the place for this, but I just want to raise the issue of the adequacy of the transportation system in rural areas of the county. And I live in an area where there's some really funky roads, and there are a lot of creative adaptations that neighbors have made to address that. In some cases, sometimes it doesn't happen. If we could put another item in our bucket list, because I'm a fan of that, if we look at how do we as a county help neighbors look at the issue of proper drainage and how to have a workable, affordable road system in the county, I think it's something that we need to discuss down the road and bring neighbors in so that they can be heard on this, because I don't want to have anyone left with a feeling that they weren't considered or that they were someone didn't tell them the truth. But it's a longer term complex issue for something that's essential for every aspect of daily life. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions of staff? If not, we still have to conduct the public hearing. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Clerk of the board, are there any members of the public who have registered to speak?
No, there are not.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak that might have joined us that has anything they would like to say? You have 2 minutes. Okay, not seeing any. I'm going to go ahead and at this time close the public hearing. Do we have any further discussion, either from staff or commission?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, well then let's go ahead and entertain a motion.
So what's your pleasure with the motion that you conduct the first reading of ordinance 21-05? You've already taken the testimony.
Yeah, conduct the first reading of ordinance 2105 by title only.
By title only, right. Okay. I'll make that motion with your help. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, moved and seconded that the board conduct the first reading of ordinance number 21-05 by title only. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. County Council, can we have the first reading by title only, please?
Ordinance 21-05, revisions to subdivision and partition regulations and road construction standards.
Thank you very much, County Council. Thank you very much, Community Development Director Hendrickson. Thank you. And you're up again. We're going to have the extension of the short-term rental moratorium on page 86. This will be a public hearing as well. We'll start with the staff report and I'll turn it over to Gail.
Okay, thank you. So staff is coming before you this evening to request a 120-day extension to the existing short-term rental moratorium that's currently in place. We have been working on the issue of short-term rentals for quite a while now, dating back just most recently to February and several work sessions that have been held throughout the year. On August 25th, the board did approve an ordinance that put the current moratorium into place effective September 1st of this year. So we were able to adopt an initial 120-day moratorium because the lands that are included in the moratorium area, some of them are considered urban or urbanizable. And because of that, we had 120 days initially with the option to come back and request a further extension. So the moratorium that's in place right now is set to expire on December 29th of this year. If the extension is approved for 120 days, that would extend that moratorium to April 28th of next year. And I did put our notice requirements up there. We did make sure that we got our notices to the Department of Land Conservation and Development on time. So to kind of show you where we're at in this process, initially we had envisioned a 6-month process, a little bit over 6 months, knowing that we would have to come back and request an extension. So to date, we have had 2 public town hall meetings. The first one was held on September 24th, where we talked about parking, trash, noise, the ability to transfer a permit, how long permits should be issued for, and how much they should cost. And then on November 12th, we had our second town hall meeting, and we talked about occupancy limits in a short-term rental, how often you could rent one out. We talked about our violation process and how you make complaints and how those are handled and what penalties are. And we also touched briefly on unsubstantiated complaints. If the moratorium is extended, we have scheduled currently a 3rd and final town hall meeting, which is scheduled for 10 o'clock on January 22nd, and this will be a virtual town hall meeting. We're going to be talking about good neighbor standards, the requirements for your local representative or agent who represents you if you are not actually on the ground or in the area, talking about neighborhood notification requirements, and also about zoning and short-term rentals. And then following the completion of that town hall meeting, we will be bringing all that recommendations and comments back to the board at a work session that's tentatively scheduled for January 26th. And then we have 2 public hearings scheduled on the final ordinance revisions on February 9th and February 23rd. And even though the moratorium, if it's extended, would go to April 28th, it's very likely that some recommendations will come out of these meetings regarding changes to the zoning code. And staff has thought it prudent to continue the moratorium while we process those changes as well. However, if the board did want to lift the moratorium after their February hearing, they could also have that option. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Hendrickson. Do we have any questions from staff? Any questions from the commission? Not seeing any. We'll go ahead and move right into the public hearing. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Clerk of the board, are there any members of the public who have registered to speak?
No, there are not.
Is there anyone that has joined us who would like to speak?
Yes, this is Rick Smith.
Okay, Rick, if you could state your name and address for the record, you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
My name is Rick Smith, and I live in Falcon Cove on Ray Brown Road. And I would like to encourage the commissioners to support this extension because of all the questions that have been raised by a variety of residents and STR owners and others up and down the coast. I don't feel have been properly addressed in the time frame to resolve the moratorium issues without the extension. So I really encourage the commissioners to extend it so that those questions can be answered. Some of those questions are things like responding to letters that were submitted to the board back in January by a group of 75 property owners, where they were detailing their opposition to the STRs, as well as issues about coastal residential zoning and other issues about looking like the commissioners have favoring interests of business owners who live outside the county, or in many situations even live outside the state, and you don't have voting rights themselves. They're just in it for the money. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else who would like to speak? And this is on the SDR, or this is on the SDR moratorium, the extension. Okay, not seeing any other comments, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Will we have any other comments from the commission? Anything, comments from staff? If not, we'll need a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Board of Commissioners approve the resolution and order extending the moratorium on the licensing and processing of new short-term rental applications to April 28th, 2022.
Need a second?
I second that.
Okay, moved and seconded to move that the Board of Commissioners approve the resolution in order extending the moratorium on the licensing and processing of new short-term rental applications to April 28th, 2022. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries and the extension is granted. We'll move on to the business item. This is agenda. We have the first item being Ambulance Service Area Advisory Committee. And this is reappointments to the Service Advisory Committee on page 95. And Tiffany Brown, our emergency manager, is joining us and she'll present on this.
Good evening, Chair Quila, commissioners. I'm before you tonight to ask for appointments to the Ambulance Service Area Advisory Committee. We have 2 reappointments for our chair and vice chair, Dwayne Johnson and Jill Tillotson. And the 3rd reappointment is to replace the current Fire Defense Board Chief Joey Daniels with Cannon Beach Fire Chief Mark Reckman. That's the long and short of it, unless there are questions.
Any questions? If none, we'll need a motion to appoint.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve appointing Chief Mark Reckman for a 3-year term and reappointing Dwayne Johnson and Jill Tillotson to the Ambulance Service Area Advisory Committee for another 2-year term.
Second.
Moved and seconded to appoint Chief Mark Reckman for a 3-year term and reappoint Dwayne Johnson and Jill Tillotson to the Ambulance Service Advisory Committee for another 2-year term. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Next item is contribution to veterans or the Vietnam Veterans War Memorial, State Capitol Grounds, page 102.
Apologies, Chair. Trying to multitask and I got myself into trouble. So as you all recall, in a work session, we came before your board with a question in regards to making a contribution to the Veterans Memorial that's going to be getting built down in Salem. And the county is proposing that we make a donation of $5,000 towards this contribution or towards this memorial. And so we're looking for a motion to approve a budget adjustment to process this, this donation.
I would like to make this motion if possible.
Actually, Commissioner Webb.
It looks like we have a few folks that want to comment on it, and thank you, Assistant
Oh, I'm
County.
sorry.
Let's go ahead and allow for some discussion. County Commissioner Thompson.
Well, thank you. I brought this issue before the commission several years ago, and I have kept bringing it to the commission until it has finally been able to move through, for which I am extremely grateful. Because I have personal experience.
Make a motion.
And so someone, okay.
Give discussion, then the motion to approve. So.
Hey, Commissioner Turok, I think you're on there if you want to mute.
So I would say that I have personal experience in the Marine Corps. I would say that my husband has 6,500 flying hours in the Vietnam War. So I have a very personal level of support for this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Banks, did you have a comment?
I had a question, not pertaining whether or not I support this or not, but along the lines of, I can't remember which commissioner asked about the donations coming from other counties. Did we ever figure out the answer to that question?
We did, and we followed up with other counties, and Teresa can speak to it more since she did that work.
Yes, we followed up. Dawn asked me to follow up with 3 counties. I do not, that was a while ago, so I don't remember, but each of them gave $5,000. So we are right in with what they donated.
Thank you, Teresa. Any other comments? Commissioner Teoka?
No comment. I'm supportive.
Commissioner Webb?
Yeah, I think the last time we talked about this, I mentioned the possibility, and I explored it, and it is included. This isn't just a memorial for the fallen. It's also in honor of the people who served, which I think is extremely important. A lot of people came back from Vietnam wounded in every way but physically, and were not well received by the population, etc. So to me, this memorial kind of checks all the boxes, and I think it's long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb, and a very important clarification that is. Thanks. Commissioner Thompson, I know you've worked hard on this. If you want to make the motion.
I hate to be this gimme person. Commissioner Webb, I know you have a very personal, emotional attachment to this. Please forgive me. Go ahead and make the motion and I'll be happy to second it.
Okay. I move that the board approve a $5,000 contribution to the Vietnam War Memorial Fund, along with a budget adjustment to remain in compliance with Oregon budget law per ORS 294.463, and authorize the chair to sign it.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Webb and seconded by Commissioner Thompson. Thank you both. To the board approve a $5,000 contribution to the Vietnam War Memorial Fund, along with the budget adjustment to remain in compliance with Oregon budget law per ORS 294.463, and authorize the chair to sign. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries.
So maybe we'll all go on the bus down to the mall in Salem, yes?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, thank you both. Thank you for that support. We'll move on to the next item is appeal of hearings officer decision, Brotherton McConaughey, CUP on page 105. And this is another item that has additional materials on the website, so it must be voluminous in nature, but we'll turn it over to Ian Sisson, our senior planner.
Thank you, Chair Kouila. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Ian Sisson, Senior Planner, Community Development Department. This is a voluminous project we have in front of us. Staff has been working on this for over a year. And so tonight I am presenting to you hopefully a brief summary of where we're at and what we would like from you this evening. So to get started, staff has issued a denial of a conditional use permit application. That application was appealed by the permit applicants to the hearings officer, and the hearings officer decided to uphold the staff decision and adopted staff's findings and decision. And so now the permit applicants have appealed the hearings officer's decision to the board. So tonight, this will not be a public hearing, but rather we are requesting the board to decide how to proceed with the appeal, and so and to determine the scope of that review. So you know, essentially we're asking you to either uphold the hearings officer's decision or to re-review the case. And if you decide to re-review the case, you could do that in full or in part. And if you do decide to do that, we would ask that you define what those parameters are tonight. So also of note, if you do decide to re-review the case, that this would likely require a special meeting. So the options that we have set forth in the code for reviewing this appeal are either to deny the review. That would essentially mean upholding the hearings officer's decision and just summarily affirming that. You could hold a review on the record, which means you would just review what's already in the record. You wouldn't accept any new information or hold a public hearing. You just would deliberate on the information that's currently in the record and reach your decision. You could hold a limited review where you sort of pick one or more issues that you believe warrant further hearing and are necessary to conclude this matter. Or you could hold an entire new hearing, a de novo hearing, and essentially that would be, you know, as if no previous decisions had been made. And so you'd be reviewing it fresh. So now I just want to summarize what the application was that we received and the property information, the property where this application was submitted. So this
just
is
one
at
second,
the
Ian.
corner of,
Sure. Ian, just one second. If you're not presenting, and Ian's the only one, if you could mute yourself, please, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Are we going to be able to present anything tonight?
Yeah, but you can, but if you can please mute yourself at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the subject property is at the corner of Old Highway 30 and Waterhouse Road in Napa. It is 4 acres in size and it's zoned exclusive farm use, or EFU. The EFU zone has a few different provisions for establishing a residential dwelling. And so the ones that the applicants picked was called a lot of record dwelling. And that's where if a property is a legal lot that has been owned in common ownership since on or before 1985, those folks can apply to put a dwelling there. However, there are still a number of other criteria that apply, and it's a conditional use. So there's a type 2 procedure, and it's subject to this section in our standards document 3.512, which implements the Oregon administrative rules for the exclusive farm use zone, and that's OAR 660.033.130. And one very important thing is that in the EFU zone, of course, uses other than farming are generally restricted, but they're especially restricted when the property is considered high value farmland. And so high value farmland is another thing that's defined in our code, and our code definition comes directly from the Oregon administrative rules. So those sections are cited here on this slide. So this particular property, the predominant soil type you can see on the map is 45A, which the Natural Resources Conservation Service classifies as a type 2 for farmland capability. And so any soil, any property rather, that is predominantly composed of a type 2 capability soil is considered high value farmland. And so essentially more restrictive criteria apply when you're looking at non-farm uses for these types of property. And so the NRCS Web Soil Survey is where we get that information. It's the official source of data for the farmland capability classifications. And as a side note, people can choose to challenge that or find better information, and there's a process for that outlined in the Oregon administrative rules as well, where they can work with a professional soil classifier to investigate the site and prepare a site-specific assessment. So for this particular property, at least as far as I know and up until now, there's been no site-specific assessment for this property, and so the NRCS data that we have is the best available information. And so again, that led us to the finding that this is considered high value farmland. So the application criteria for a dwelling under the provision for which the applicants submitted their application require a review of what's called the impracticability standard. And the code section is cited there from our standards document, as well as the Oregon administrative rule, which our code implements. And so essentially that requires us to be able to make a finding that the property cannot be practicably managed for farm use by itself or in conjunction with other land, and due to extraordinary circumstances that are inherent in the land or its physical setting that don't apply generally to other land in the vicinity. So in their application, the applicants had described characteristics of this property that would make farming difficult, such as Big Creek along the western border. They've got road frontages on 2 sides, and adjacent to the road frontages, they have some steeper slopes. And so they were saying that the property is generally not conducive to commercial scale agriculture, but there might be an area, 2 or more acres, that could potentially be farmed. So staff did a bunch of research on this. This isn't the type of application we receive on a regular basis, and investigated quite a bit of case law and found that LUBA has established basically that the impracticability standard is very demanding and that farm use can't be said to be impracticable simply because it's not easy to manage the property for farm use or that obstacles must be overcome. And in this case that's cited here, Friends of Lynn County versus Lynn County, LUBA also held that the impracticability standard does not apply exclusively to commercial scale agricultural enterprises. In other words, Goal 3 is intended to protect lower scale, lesser scale farm uses as well. So according to LUBA, the way to determine if a property is could practicably be farmed in terms of how much income it could generate is to look at how much income a parcel would need to generate to qualify for a special tax assessment. And those are outlined in the Oregon Revised Statutes. So for a property such as this one, which is less than 6 acres in size, that income requirement to qualify for a special assessment would be $650. And that's gross annual income, not net. It's how much income that property could potentially generate from farming in a calendar year. So what staff found was to be able to approve the application, it would need to be demonstrated that the property is not capable of generating at least $650 in gross annual revenue from farming. And so based on research done by staff and communication with a small farm expert at the OSU Extension, staff determined that there were various possible farm uses that could be supported on the property, which would generate at least or well over $650 in gross annual revenue. And some of those examples were Christmas trees, fresh market vegetables, berries, rhubarb, garlic, and cut flowers. And there's some examples of at least some of those uses in the vicinity in the Napa and Svensson area. So therefore, staff concluded that the property could be practicably managed for farm use, and we did not have substantial information or evidence to the contrary from the applicant, and so we were not able to approve the application based on failure to meet the impracticability standard. So an appeal was made of the staff decision to deny the conditional use application to the hearings officer. So that first appeal per our code was to be heard by the hearings officer, and there was a de novo public hearing. So the hearings officer reviewed it fresh, as if the staff decision had not been made. The issues the applicant raised in that appeal included that dwellings had been approved on other farmland and that the soil information was not accurate, or at least was outdated. Hillary Foote, the farm forest specialist for DLCD, did provide comments for the hearing in support of the staff findings and decision. Essentially said, the property was correctly identified as high value farmland and that the findings staff made appeared to be the correct findings. The hearings officer concurred with the staff decision and ended up adopting the staff findings and the conclusions and ended up denying the appeal request. So again, the applicants have decided to appeal the hearings officer's decision, and that appeal goes to your board. The grounds of appeal stated by the applicants are that extraordinary circumstances do exist that preclude the subject property from being put to farm use without undue hardship, that the property owners have had difficulty restocking the site with merchantable timber after a previous harvest in 2013, that the property has been owned by the same family since the 1950s, and the owners have had hopes of eventually developing this site with a home, and that the applicants or appellants in this matter believe the criteria have been met and that the subject property is generally unsuitable for commercial farm use by itself or in conjunction with other land. So in regard to the materials that were submitted with this appeal, a few takeaways from staff. Generally, those materials restate the reasons that we were given initially, that the appellants believe the property cannot be practically managed for farm use. They included a document from OSU related to Christmas tree farms. That was discussed as one of the potential uses of this property. The document suggests that Christmas tree farms in Oregon would operate at a net loss over the first several years, and that basically suggested that farmers should seek other opportunities to become profitable, such as value-added products or experiences like you-cut trees. The appeal materials did not address other possible farm uses, such as the examples that I listed previously, nor did they demonstrate that the property is not capable of generating at least $650 in gross annual income from farming. And the appeal materials also notably did not contest the applicability of the case law that was cited by staff in the decision. So overall, the materials submitted with the appeal don't substantially augment what was provided with the original application or in the first appeal. Staff has contacted the appellants to confirm whether they wanted to provide any additional information. They did state that they hope to provide testimony if there were a public hearing from an attorney or possibly a soils expert, but we were not provided with any further information or details on the scope of what that testimony would include. So the staff conclusion here is based on the lack of substantive new information associated with the appeal request. Our position is that the matter does not warrant further hearing, and we recommend that the board summarily affirm the hearings officer's decision issued October 12th, 2021, and deny the appeal. In closing, just to restate, so our scope of work tonight for you is to decide whether to uphold the hearings officer's decision or if you'd like to re-review the case. And if you would like to re-review the case, to specify what the parameters are for that review. And so I've got the options up here again on this slide. I won't repeat them, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Senior Planner Sisson. Now, I know that the applicants have joined us, and I need to go to County Council to have a refresher of exactly what is procedure here. So I'll turn it over to County Council.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Planner Sisson had said about what the decision here is. It's really whether to review the case or to summarily affirm, and of course, review has different steps and levels. But if you choose to review the case, at that point, the applicants can bring their arguments and address your board. At this point, it would be atypical to have the applicants provide testimony or comments, because ultimately you're not making a decision based on tonight's, other than to decide whether to affirm or to review the packet and the information. I will note that if you affirm this decision, much like what we dealt with maybe about a month or two ago, the decision then becomes final from the city or from the county's perspective, and then it can be appealed to LUBA. And so there is further one more appeal that the applicants can avail themselves of. I just wanted to provide that additional context. Thank you.
Thank you, County Council. Do we have, from the members of the commission, do we have any comments? Commissioner Bang.
I will have to admit that this whole situation kind of frustrates me, especially when considering we're in a housing crisis and we're looking to deny somebody building a home. That conundrum, I guess, that situation just feels wrong to me. I personally would like a review of the case, but I also want to note that I fully support staff and all of the decisions that they've made up until this point in regards to following process and case law. I admire that you are staying within the realm of your within the realm of your job and your perusal. I, though, feel unable to make a decision without further exploration, because frankly, I find myself, how can you farm land without actually living on it? That's the first thought that jumped into my mind when I was reading through all of this. And secondly, why, you know, I can cite in my own mind a number of farming properties that all have homes upon them in our county, in that this particular unincorporated area. And so I'm just kind of stuck in, I really would like to assist these constituents, these residents, in how can we help them build a house. That's the perspective I'm coming from, especially in a housing crisis. And I'm not seeing, other than case law, and which is valid, case law is valid. So I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place here, because case law is valid, ORS law is valid, but I also feel like we need to do, I don't know. These are just my thoughts and feelings off the cuff.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. I share your concerns on this matter, and I agree with you that our staff is wholly professional and does a tremendous job for us, and I completely support the process. I do find that, you know, just looking at it from the outside, thinking small tract of land, 6 acres, $650. I mean, I just have a hard time just reconciling all of that myself. I really do think we need to review this, and I would be in favor of a either limited review or de novo, one of the two. So I'll leave it up to the rest of the commission, but I do feel like this is worth a review, because I think that the standards in which are outmoded here. $650 is nothing, and certainly this is a small tract of land, and the viability of doing something on that small of a piece of land is extremely challenging. Commissioner Thompson had her hand up. Commissioner Thompson.
Well, okay. So there's state law, and then there's logic and current reality, right? Okay. How can we possibly, as people who take an oath to uphold the law, do anything except uphold the law? I mean, LUBA can have a different decision. It's not that, I mean, I can't make myself not obey the state law. I took an oath of office. It doesn't have to be reasonable or logical or current. If we want the state law changed, for God's sake, let's get the state law changed. But until it does, I'm obliged to uphold the state law. That's just, and I get very emotional. Sorry. Done.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Any other members of the commission? I see Commissioner Webb.
Yes, thank you, Chair Cuela. In my 35 years of being a land use planner in the state of Oregon, I've seen just about all kinds of application reviews. I'm not sure there are any that put as much of a burden on staff as the EFU component of the state land use planning law. It's, and actually, I think over the years it has been sharpened significantly. And I think in agreement with Commissioner Thompson, the point was that when our legislation was formed was to maintain as much farmland as possible in the state of Oregon, farm and forest land in the state of Oregon. When I went through this application and the history, et cetera, which I did in detail, I was struck by the fact that the bar for this is really very, very low. The point is that we want to maintain viable farmland. This is top grade farmland in terms of its quality. And so the idea that the so-called burden on the applicant is to only put in something that maintains the integrity of the farmland that would be of value of $650 a year. And actually, I've also seen that yearly value be accepted over a sort of an average over a number of years. So I don't think the burden was this high. And this is state law. I can tell you, in my opinion, if this application went to LUBA right now, it would be upheld because the staff report is terrific. It's absolutely terrific. They went down every possible highway in terms of state law, and they gave the applicants an enormous amount of time to fulfill the requirements of the application, and they simply didn't deliver. So I think this is a little bit of a conundrum. I mean, procedurally speaking, if the applicants wanted to come back, I mean, I guess I have to turn to Joanna to help me out here. We could, as I understand it, we could say that we will accept review of this application, but we have to stipulate the basis of that review. Am I right, County Council?
So Commissioner Webb, I believe what you're asking me is what level of review you are providing? Is that kind of your question?
No, my question is that when I've seen these cases before, I mean, we could just say we're going to affirm this denial, but we also have another choice. We could also say we will review the following parts of this application.
Well, I guess I would have to defer to Director Henriksen because I believe our local development ordinance provides options. One option is to deny review, which you mentioned, restricting review to the record, so that evidence that's already been introduced by the hearings body, or limit review. So I suppose that gets to your question about limiting review to such issues as the Board of Commissioners determines necessary, or de novo, you can open it up and include any information that they provide. So I'm not really sure. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm not really sure what limit review to such issues has been done at Clatsop County before. But if you had a specific idea, perhaps we can talk about that and come to some conclusion.
Yeah, I can tell you that given my experience in Oregon, a de novo hearing at this point, I think would not be constructive. Because it would be, I just don't think it would. I just don't think it would be constructive. But we could stipulate that we are willing to review the issue of whether or not there can be a viable farm enterprise on this property. In which case we would be offering the applicants the opportunity to change their application or to add to their application. Because my experience with EFU is you've got to come up with a farm plan. You know, LUBA, I don't think would uphold anybody, our saying, no, we're gonna make an exception on this property. I think the facts are just too clear here. So it's my understanding that option 3 for a limited review, that we might be able to stipulate that we will consider a limited review concerning the ability of the applicant to perform a farmland enterprise on this property. I almost think that's our only, that's the only way we can go with this. Or we can simply deny it, which it sounds to me like a lot of us would kind of be uncomfortable with.
Thank you. I appreciate your background in land use. It's very helpful for discussions like this. Commissioner Banks.
So just for a point of clarification to make sure I am understanding Commissioner Webb correctly, is that if they provide some sort of farm plan that validates the use of the property, they would be allowed to build. Am I understanding your statement correctly, or am I off?
I think I would ask County Council to affirm that for me, because it would be fairly unusual to allow the applicant to come forward at this point in the process.
Commissioners, I am not a planning expert. I know procedure, so I'm going to defer, of course, to our fabulous planner and Director Henriksen if needed.
Thank you. I just wanted to try to clarify that. So, oops. So if you were to hold the limited review and say you were to select the issue of whether the property could be farmed or not, keep in mind that this particular set of criteria we have to work with requires that the property cannot be farmed in order to be able to build the home. So I would point out that there are other avenues in the code that provide for what's called a dwelling customarily provided in conjunction with farm use. And so that would be for a property that we know can be farmed. There are a different set of criteria that apply there. And those are, you know, what kind of income you would need to generate from that farm use in order to be able to build, versus, again, in this case, it's required to demonstrate that the property cannot be farmed. So what we've found as staff is that we believe the property can be farmed. And so, you know, if you were to hold a limited hearing on that topic, in order for the applicants to prevail in that appeal and to be able to build their home, they would need to demonstrate that the property cannot be farmed.
Right.
Their other option would be to submit a new application. Rather than continuing to pursue the appeal, they would submit a new application for a dwelling customarily provided in conjunction with farm use, and we would sort of start over with the new set of criteria that apply to that particular provision in our code.
Thank you, Senior Planner Sisson. I see we had a couple hands up. So Commissioner Thompson first, and then Commissioner.
Thank you, sir. So Planner Sisson, if I hear you correctly, sorry, Senior Planner Sisson, if I hear you correctly, if the applicants want to agree to farm and produce $650 worth of revenue on average a year, they would be allowed to build a house. Is that clear? Am I right in that?
Unfortunately,
with a new application, not with this one, but with a new application.
So with a new application, for lack of a better phrase, the goalpost sort of moves on the income requirement, and it unfortunately it moves quite a bit. So for high value farmland, you actually have to demonstrate, and this may be what Commissioner Webb was referring to earlier. So for a dwelling in conjunction with farm use, the income standard for a high value farmland property is $80,000 per year. And you have to demonstrate that that amount of money has been generated for a certain period of time, in the order of, you know, 2 out of the last 3 years or 3 out of the last 5 years. And so it requires the farming to start up front and the revenue generation to start up front. So they would need to start farming this property, generating revenue, keeping books and documenting everything, and then they would be able to submit the application for a dwelling in conjunction with this farm use.
Thank you. So the point is, current state law, as Commissioner Webb says, is designed to protect high-value farmland, because otherwise everybody and their uncle would be buying up farmland and converting it to housing, which is the whole reason that all of the land use planning in Oregon came into being. Now, it came into being at a time when high-value farmland, people wanted to protect it. We now have a competing desire, community need to have housing. I feel great compassion for the applicants because they want to have their home. I would love to have them have their home. I am not willing to turn state law on its head for one person, because what we have is a systematic issue. I would hope that they would hold on to their land while the rest of us get together and work to figure out how do we have enough buildable land in Clatsop County to meet our housing needs. I'm not willing to violate the law. I'm not willing to do anything except deny this review, because the staff has done its work. It's been affirmed by the hearing officer, and there's no reason under the law to do anything else. Now, I'm all for changing the laws because I'm really clear. We need more buildable land. We shouldn't, I think, for me, do it on a case-by-case basis by ignoring a law that we don't like right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Banks?
I just wanted to be transparent that I'm not up for breaking any laws. What I am trying to push is conversation on how to help a landowner be able to develop. And from an agriculturist perspective, $80,000 off that 6 acres is impossible. I wouldn't know unless you're growing something that you shouldn't be growing. I don't know how that's even possible to create $80,000 a year off of that land. Now, when talking about the $650, so I will be completely transparent and upfront. When I first moved here 12 years ago, I tried to do my own greenhouse, vegetables, CSA, which is community supported agriculture, and it was nearly impossible. And so, and that was on the acreage that we have there in Napa. And there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And those greenhouses, they're still sitting on my land, and they're used every year for our own family's vegetables, but that's about it. So I personally am not ready to pull a trigger on this decision and toss the ability for these landowners to be able to develop out the door without me personally exploring conversation with our staff and exploring conversation. And it's out of just abundance of I know where they're at, and I want to be able to advocate for them as best as I can before the decision is made in this situation. And so, but I also want to be very clear that I am not up for breaking state law. I don't want that assumption to be out, running amok in town. But that I want to see if we can explore other options to help these landowners develop.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. Commissioner Toyo.
Just a question then. So I did a little map search on that area, and I mean, there's tons of residences, homes within that same area, parcels adjoining, and it's all over the place in that region. I mean, how did the other landowners build homes on similar plots? Were they, does it predate the law, or how did they get to that point? Because like I said, you look at the map setting, there's homes all over the place. How did we get to there, and how did the other homeowners build? How were they able to build their homes?
Thanks for your question. I'll go ahead and respond.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look at the zoning surrounding that property, particularly to the to the east and to the south, where you see a lot of homes and a relatively high density of homes, those are actually within the Napa rural community boundary, and those are under a Napa rural residential zoning. And so that just allows by outright permitted type 1 development to build a home on those lots because they're under a different zoning designation. So for this particular property, again, it's in the EFU, exclusive farm use zone. The benefit, I guess, of the proximity to this residential zoning is that it means this property could potentially be a good candidate for a zone change. Zoning in Oregon, we can't do spot zoning, so we couldn't just apply whatever zone we want to this property. That would make it easier to build a home on it. We would be able to potentially, through a process, we could potentially approve a zone change for the property to one of the zones that it's contiguous with. And so to the west, we have the RA2 zone. That's a residential agricultural zone. And then to the east, we have the Napa-Swenson Rural Community Residential Zone. And so the more likely candidate would be the RA2 because you wouldn't have to move the rural community boundary, which gets us into a whole other Goal 14 exercise. And so it would come with a requirement to change the comprehensive plan designation for the property from agricultural land to rural land, I believe, so that it could be zoned RA2. And so that could either happen by request from the applicant. They could apply for a zone change and an exception to Goal 3, or that could potentially happen if the board decided to pursue some broader brush application of new zoning to produce more housing in the county by changing the zoning of particular land. But anyway, that's a roundabout way of answering your question, why there are houses in the close vicinity. It's because they're under a different zoning designation that allows residential development by right.
Thank you, Senior Planner Assistant. Commissioner Webb.
Yeah, I think if you read the application that was submitted, the staff report, the staff did what is very, very common in cases like this, and they did an area analysis, and it's fully documented in the staff report about the area that they looked at. They took a protractor and said, okay, because the point is, what does this neighborhood look like? And I felt that the staff was very, very competent in assessing those issues in this area. We happen to have a piece of property here that is up against one of our rural, what's the right word, factors in developing land in rural areas, which is to take a look at the neighborhood. Even though, I thought that the staff took a very broad look at that. It's all in the staff report. It shows, I thought it was a marvelous staff report, and that addresses those issues. And as I say, my vision is always toward LUBA. Is this appealable? I think the staff report is so good that it would be very difficult just on the basis of the current conditions and in the staff report. I think this would never make it past LUBA. It's just that good. And they did everything they could do. They dotted every I and crossed every T.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Commissioner Thompson.
Well, okay, so Senior Planner Sisson, a rezoning, that's a legal action that would be proposed. Is there any legal issue with a rezoning request? They'd have to do another application. It would be a conditional use as well. Walk me through the alternative that's a legal, because I appreciate Commissioner Banks, I wasn't trying to accuse you of anything, but I get all worked up about, yes, we have to follow the law. When I came on the Clatsop County Planning Commission, I was told by one of my colleagues that following the law didn't used to be required there. Well, it's different. It's different. So yes, how can we follow the law and still get them the ability to build their house? Because I'd love to have them be able to build their house, but I want it to be legal. Help me see how that might happen, please.
Sure. So a zone change application would frankly be quite complicated and rather expensive. It's probably something that an attorney would need to prepare, or a professional land use consultant would need to prepare. It would involve, essentially being able to demonstrate that the land is not zoned appropriately the way it is, and why the proposed zone change is more appropriate than the current zoning. And it would require what's called a goal exception, because currently that property is in the EFU zone, which is the main zone that implements Goal 3 for agricultural lands, to preserve agricultural lands for agricultural uses. And so, essentially, the goal exception process involves demonstrating why this particular piece of land would not contribute to Goal 3, and why Goal 3 should not be applicable to it. It's again an in-depth and complicated exercise for someone to be able to demonstrate, as far as that being an application that someone would submit. I do believe there's also the opportunity, and Gail might help me out with this, but for the board to make legislative action. I think we would still need to support something like that with the same types of findings about, basically we would be the applicant in that case, and be held to the same standards and criteria. But that's essentially the process. I don't know if I've described it adequately for you. I can go on if you want.
Oh, please, God, no, that's enough for now. With all respect. So my concern is, often in cases like this, there's an environmental organization that will start legal action on the other side saying, County Board of Commissioners, you aren't following the law in your ruling. So I think we can't solve this tonight. We have too many questions. I think if we can table this, that'd be a good idea. Maybe we need to talk more about this. Maybe the applicant needs to talk more with staff and consider options, but I don't think we're ready to make a decision tonight.
I think we're all in agreement with that. Commissioner Bangs has a question.
Not a question, but I move to table this discussion to a later date.
Second.
Move second to table this matter to a later date. I see that before we take a vote, our community development director has things she wants to add.
Thank you. I just want Ian to verify where we're at. We have a 150-day rule, and under state statute, we have 150 days to process an application, and the applicants could allow additional time, but they would have to grant that to us in writing, and they're not required to. If we don't meet the 150-day rule, then we are in violation of state statute. So I'd just like Ian to verify where we're at with that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Gail. So we are actually past 150 days, and that's because to accommodate the first appeal with the hearings officer, we requested that the applicant grants or ask for an extension to the 150-day rule. And so they did request that extension, and the extension expires 4 days from now on December 12th. And so we've already extended that deadline. And just for context on the 150-day rule, it's really a courtesy for the applicant to get a decision on their application in a timely fashion.
So in order to table this, we would need another extension from, or a applicant would have to agree to another extension
That's correct.
Will agree.
And the applicant has said that they will agree to that.
I should say also that the maximum possible extension we can grant, whether the applicant would be willing to go longer or not, is a total of 365 days. And so I would need to double check where that would put us. We had a 90-day extension that ends December 12th. So we would have another, sorry, mental math is failing me right now. But I believe that would give us another few months. So in other words, the clock would still be ticking because we have that total limit of 365 days.
Okay.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Is that okay? Okay. County Council?
I see from the agenda summary that the application was deemed complete on April 16th.
Thank you.
Commissioner Banks, we still have a motion and a second. We haven't taken a vote yet, so we're continuing discussion. Commissioner Banks.
I just wanted to say thank you to staff for bearing with me on this, and thank you for being patient, and hopefully I will be able to see you within the next week to dig through your brains. I apologize first. And continue the motion in second.
And then one question to County Council: are we continuing this to a date, or are we just tabling this matter to our next public meeting? What is the process here?
Chair, I believe you could do either. It's not an actual land use decision hearing, so you don't have to continue to a date certain. But it might be nice for everybody involved, and just to make sure we're on the safe side of the law, to continue it to the next regularly scheduled board meeting might be a nice idea.
Okay. Senior Planner Assistant.
Sorry. Yeah, what would help for staff is to understand what information the board will like at that next meeting, so that we can make sure we have time to prepare that for you.
Okay. I saw Gail, you had something you wanted to say as well. No?
No, Ian got my question in. Thank you.
Okay.
And Chair, I just want to say that the next regularly scheduled board meeting is January 12th.
January 12th. Okay. So we can table the matter January 12th. Perhaps specific issues can be directed to our community development director and our senior planner. I know that the viability of the farmland being one of those. Commissioner Banks?
I think the only direction that I would be requesting is making sure that we exhaust every avenue of how we can potentially help these people develop. So that's the direction I'm headed, just so that you are, I don't know if it's forearmed or aware, but sorry, I'm really tired. I apologize.
Understandable. Community Development Director.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, what we are trying to decide right now is whether or not on January 12th, the board will want to either affirm and deny the decision or to re-review it. And so the appeal process that we're in right now, and this appeal to the board, is a separate process from working with staff to figure out other alternatives. So I just want to be clear, and I want everyone to understand so that we can bring you the correct information, that we need to know specifically from the board what you feel you're lacking tonight in order to decide whether to uphold the hearings officer's decision or conduct a new review. So that's the information that I need for your board to tell us to bring back. That's the piece we're missing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Thompson.
In my mind, I'm clear. I would be denying this application. What I'm looking for is an alternative. The one that was raised was rezoning. So in my mind, that's what I'm looking for, is what it would take. And if the applicant is willing and able to go through a rezoning process, that's for me. I don't know if my colleagues have another different idea, but that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Any other comments, questions? Any other direction that we want to give? Commissioner Banks?
I don't know if it's a financial impact statement or the financial impacts that I would be having upon these landowners with the decision that I would make, either to deny this and move to a different direction, or how much is rezoning potentially going to cost, so on and so forth. So there's some holes in my knowledge of this current situation that are preventing me from making this decision. And with all good intentions of trying to assist. So does that provide more direction for you, Gail? I need to see all of the avenues before.
I understand what you're saying, Commissioner, and I've taken notes on the information you need, but in my head, I'm not seeing the connection between, and perhaps I'm not looking at it correctly, but the only question before the board this evening, or possibly on January 12th, is whether or not to hear their appeal on this particular case. The question of alternatives is a separate question. And I can tell you right now that the goal exception application is $5,000. The rezoning application is $5,000. And so that would be a total of $10,000 in application fees, plus any attorney fees or land use planner fees that they would need to have. I'm not sure how staff can determine the financial impacts by affirming or having a new hearing, either denying the appeal or holding a new hearing. I don't know how staff would determine those financial impacts, other than that they would not be able to market the property as buildable, and they would not have, obviously, the sale price they could command. But we could perhaps work with the suspect. I'm thinking out loud right now because, like you, I'm tired. But you know, we may be able to find that data. But I just want to make sure that the data that you're asking us to bring back is tied specifically to this decision, and not going down a path that isn't tied to what we're looking at specifically. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. I'm still with the motion of tabling the discussion, and I will just be stopping by or giving you a phone call for other information so that we're all tracking on the same page. I thank you.
Commissioner Banks, Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Banks, just in terms of financial, everybody knows that land that's approved for building inside of a growth boundary or otherwise is more expensive than land that is not. So generally speaking, land that is purchased that isn't considered buildable for a dwelling is much less expensive. So that's part of the calculus in my mind as well. Is the initial purchase price of the land. So maybe it's late. Are we done, Mr. Chair?
We can be done, but we need to take a vote to table this.
Yep.
So all those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. And so this will be tabled till our next meeting, January 12th. In the meantime, if there are specific questions that the commission has, I think we can direct those to our senior planner and our community development director. Appreciate the applicants staying with us here, and also appreciate the applicants granting. And if I think that will need to be in writing, the extension, correct, of the extra time.
That's correct. I will get in contact with them tomorrow and get that arranged.
Okay. Thank you very much. And do we have any items for the good of the order?
I do. My daughter has sat through this meeting. She's been here since 7 a.m. So I just wanted to give a big hurrah to my oldest 12-year-old.
Absolutely. She will get a Medal of Honor for her next, make sure that she appreciates that. Any other comments for the good of the order?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
If done, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Ian, for everything. We'll
Thank you.
see you. Have a good night.